Fog curls like living breath around the edges of the narrow two-lane road leading into Hollow Creek, West Virginia. A town so small it never made it to modern GPS maps. The morning air feels thick, damp with the weight of forgotten rain, and the only sounds are the clicking of insects and the distant groan of a broken streetlight swaying above a rusted sign that reads, "Welcome to Hollow Creek, where time sleeps." Elena Park sits in her aging Subaru, engine idling, staring through the windshield at the silent town ahead. She's 28, exhausted, and running on cheap gas station coffee and ambition. Once a bright journalism graduate, now she's clawing her way through online freelance gigs. Clickbait titles, local ghost stories, whatever pays rent. But this story feels different. The kind that could make her name. A place where a family vanished overnight, leaving dinner still steaming on the table. That's not just folklore. That's the kind of headline that gets attention. As she drives into town, Hollow Creek looks like a painting someone forgot to finish. Storefronts lean at uneasy angles. A laundromat door creaks in the wind, though no one's inside. A dog barks once and stops mid-sound. Every window she passes has curtains drawn, as if the whole town is watching her from behind the glass. Elena parks in front of the old diner. The bell above the door gives a half-hearted jingle when she enters. The smell of burnt coffee and old grease clings to the air. A waitress, late 50s, her face a roadmap of tired years, glances up, then looks away without a word. The place feels staged, frozen in some forgotten decade. "Coffee?" The woman finally mutters, voice flat. Elena nods. "I'm actually here doing a story about the Harrow family. They lived out on Miller's Road?" The spoon the waitress is holding clatters to the counter. The woman's hands tremble. "You shouldn't ask about them," she whispers. "Not here. Not anymore." There's a silence that feels too long. A man in a corner booth shifts his newspaper but never looks up. Elena swallows, feeling her pulse quicken. "Why not? It's been 20 years. The waitress lowers her voice. "People who dig up Hollow Creek don't leave Hollow Creek." Elena laughs nervously, more to break the tension than from humor, but the sound falls dead in the air. The woman slides the coffee across the counter. The cup rattles like something shaking beneath her hand. "Drive home before sundown," she says, almost pleading. "Please." By noon, Elena is standing at the edge of the Harrow property. The house looms at the end of a gravel driveway overtaken by weeds. Paint peels in long strips from the siding. The windows reflect nothing. She steps through the doorway, flashlight in hand, the beams slicing through motes of dust thick as fog. Inside, time feels wrong. Plates are still set on the dining table, crusted with dust, but perfectly arranged. A child's chair lies on its side. A pot on the stove holds the remains of something that was once stew. The wallpaper curls like burned paper near the corners. The silence presses against her ears until she hears it. Faint, rhythmic. Click, click, click. Her recorder, she realizes, is still running in her pocket. She hadn't turned it on. She pulls it out, frowning, the small red light glowing steadily. "What the hell?" she mutters, but keeps recording. She moves upstairs, each step groaning under her weight. The hall smells faintly of smoke and rot. At the end of the hallway, she finds a small bedroom, a child's. Faded wallpaper shows rockets and stars. Toys sit neatly on the shelf, untouched. On the wall, carved faintly into the wood, is something that looks like letters. She leans closer with her phone light. It reads, "I'm still here." Her throat tightens. A sudden, cold draft rushes through the room, though the windows are shut. The door creaks and closes behind her. "Elena?" A whisper breathes, soft, drawn out. The kind of sound that makes every hair on her arms rise. She freezes. The voice came from the recorder. It's her own voice, from moments earlier, repeating her words out of sync. "What the hell?" Then silence. Then, again, the whisper, "Elena." She bolts for the door, pushing it open with trembling hands. Downstairs, the living room light flickers, even though the power shouldn't work. On the coffee table sits a stack of old Polaroids. She picks one up with shaking fingers. The image shows the Harrow family standing in front of the same house, smiling. In the window behind them, there's a fourth figure, a shadow, tall, featureless, watching. As she flips through the photos, she notices something odd. In the last picture, taken inside the kitchen, a woman stands at the stove. But behind her reflection in the window, there's Elena's face. Older, pale, terrified. Her breath catches. She drops the photo. It lands face down, sticking to the wood with a faint, wet sound. The air feels thicker now. The whole house seems to inhale. The walls groan. The floorboards tighten beneath her feet, as though the house itself is drawing breath. Then comes the low hum, the same one she'd heard in the diner refrigerator earlier, now louder, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She stumbles backward toward the door, but when she looks up, the windows are gone. Every pane of glass now shows only dark, shifting shapes, like someone standing just outside, circling. The doorknob won't move. Elena? The voice again, whispering from every wall now, from the air itself. Her recorder slips from her pocket and hits the floor, still rolling. The screen glitches, flashing static. And through the distortion, a new sound emerges. Another click. Not from the recorder. From somewhere behind her. She turns. The living room doorway is dark. Something moves there. Slow, deliberate, breathing in time with the house. She can't see it. Only the suggestion of limbs, the shimmer of skin. Too long, too still. It leans forward as if to speak. The flashlight flickers once, twice, and dies. In the dark, she hears her own voice again, soft, close to her ear. Don't record it. It remembers. And then silence. Only the sound of the house exhaling, long and low, until it fades into the hum of static. Hours later, a local deputy finds her car parked outside the Harrow property. Headlights still on, engine cold. Inside, the passenger seat holds her recorder, still running. On the tape, the faint sound of breathing, and beneath it, 2 clicks. One hers, one answering. The last few seconds capture her whisper, trembling, barely audible under the static. It's still here. The sound fades. The tape ends. The wind rises through the empty street of Hollow Creek, carrying whispers through the trees. Words no one can quite make out. The next town waits beyond the fog, the road stretching endlessly forward, humming with the weight of stories that shouldn't exist. Snow drifts through the cracked stained glass windows of the church on Willow Street, a silent white curtain falling over empty pews. The candles on the altar burn low, their flames bending toward the door as if reacting to something unseen. In the flicker, Father Darrell McConnell kneels, his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles have gone white. His lips move without sound, a prayer that's long since stopped being heard. The organ in the corner stands lifeless, keys dusted with frost. It hasn't been played since the winter his daughter died. Outside, the town of Lowell, Maine lies buried in snow. Only the church steeple rises above the white, a broken tooth jutting from a frozen jaw. Darrell used to say the church was the heart of this place. Now it feels more like a tomb. His sermons are still written in a notebook beside the pulpit, but there's no congregation left to hear them. The people stopped coming after the miracle. They stopped believing him when he said God had spoken through the dead. He remembers that night vividly, the night he tried to raise her. His little girl, June, 10 years old, taken by pneumonia that froze her breath in a single night. He had knelt beside her body and begged. The candles had blown out all at once. He felt the air grow warm, the scent of her shampoo in the dark. He thought he heard her voice, faint, behind him, calling, "Daddy," and then nothing. By morning, the candles were burned to the stubs, and her body was gone. Only the impression of her small form remained in the bedsheet, outlined by ash. Now, every night, he lights those same candles again. He calls it prayer. But he knows it's not. It's calling her back. The church groans in the wind as he whispers her name again and again, as if repetition alone could bridge the distance between this world and the next. The air feels heavier each time, charged, restless, like thunder before a storm. At the back of the church, something stirs. He doesn't see it at first, just hears the faint sound of footsteps moving through snow that isn't there. He lifts his head, trembling, and says softly, "June!" Silence answers. Then a creak. The last pew shifts slightly, though no one touches it. He rises, his breath fogging in the dim candlelight, and takes a step forward. His eyes are sunken, sleepless, and fever-bright. Each footfall echoes too loudly, swallowed by the emptiness of the space. The candles shudder violently. The shadows along the walls stretch upward, as if something taller than the ceiling itself is standing behind him. Daryl's voice breaks as he whispers, "Show me you're still with me." The air changes. A soft, almost playful laugh echoes. A sound that sends cold fire down his spine. The hymn books on the benches rustle, pages flipping on their own, stopping on one verse. "He mocketh me to lie down in green pastures." The words seem to bleed as the candles burn lower. He clutches the cross around his neck. "If this isn't her," he murmurs, "then tell me what it is." No voice answers, only the faint tap of bare feet moving closer. He turns toward the altar. The marble glistens wet, a thin sheen of condensation forming as if the church itself has started to breathe. And on the altar, among the wax drippings and prayer cards, lies a handprint, small, childlike, and blackened, as though burned into the stone. His heart stops. He knows that handprint. The sound of quiet sobbing rises from somewhere unseen. Daryl drops to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "June," he whispers, voice cracking. "You came back. I told them you would." The sobbing turns into breathing. Slow. Too slow. The air hums like a tuning fork, vibrating through the wood and glass. Behind him, the shadow of a little girl forms on the wall. Long hair, small frame, head tilted slightly. But as she moves, her reflection in the candlelight doesn't match her steps. Her limbs bend at strange angles. Her head tilts the wrong way. Daryl doesn't see this. His eyes are locked on the altar, on the handprint that's beginning to smoke. The candles extinguish all at once. Only the moonlight remains, spilling through fractured glass and painting the aisle in silver shards. The air is alive now, whispering prayers he never wrote. Dozens of them, layered voices speaking from nowhere. Some sound like children. Some sound like his own voice, echoing his words a second later. The crucifix above the altar begins to tilt, groaning against the nail that holds it. Daryl staggers forward, reaching out, trying to steady it, but something grips his wrist. Cold, delicate, a small hand. He looks down, and for the first time in years he sees her face. "June." She smiles faintly, but her eyes are hollow. Not empty, but full of something vast and black. Her lips part. Her voice comes out like wind through dead leaves. "You prayed for me, Daddy. You opened the door." He can't speak. He just nods, tears blurring his vision. "I missed you," he manages. Her smile widens, too wide, stretching past human expression. "Then stay." The church begins to shake. The pews groan. Hymnals fly open, their pages fluttering as if caught in a storm. The stained glass behind the altar glows from within, not with light, but with fire. And in that glow, shapes move. Figures with faces melted into smoothness, mouths open as if screaming without sound. Daryl tries to back away, but the hand gripping his wrist tightens, impossibly strong. The candles relight in a burst, flames standing unnaturally straight, blue-white, hissing. The shadow on the wall grows taller, stretching from floor to ceiling, the outline of something with arms far too long, its shape flickering like film burning in a projector. "God protect me," he whispers, but even he doesn't believe it. June's head tilts, eyes glimmering with what looks almost like pity. "You asked for a miracle," she says softly. "You just forgot who listens." Her hand slides from his wrist to his throat, not choking, just resting there cold and final. His body goes still. The tremors stop. The church becomes silent again, save for the crackle of candles. Slowly, she lowers him to his knees before the altar. His eyes stare upward, wide, glassy, reflecting the glow of the flames. When morning comes, the townsfolk find the church doors open, snow blown across the pews. Father Darrell is there, kneeling in prayer, his head bowed against the altar as if in peace. Only the blackened handprint beside him hints at what happened. And though no one dares to touch the body, they swear they hear faint humming when they enter. A child's lullaby carried on the cold wind. The church bells ring once at noon, even though the ropes have been frozen solid for years. By evening, the candles have burned themselves out, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and something sweet, like lilacs. And as the last ember fades, a whisper drifts through the empty space. He stayed. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering everything in quiet white. The sound of the final bell echoes down the empty street, fading into the hum of distant cicadas far away, somewhere beyond the cold, where another town waits for the next story to begin. The rain has been falling for hours along Route 49, turning the cracked asphalt into a slick black ribbon stretching endlessly between dark fields. It's nearly midnight, and the world feels hollow, empty of everything except the hum of tires and the sound of static on the radio. Inside his truck, Ken Matthews grips the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles pale, eyes heavy from too many sleepless nights. He's been driving for 16 hours straight, chasing miles that never seem to end. The dashboard clock flickers, its red digits jumping back and forth between times that make no sense. 11:47. 11:52. 11:47 again. He taps it once, but it stays wrong. Outside, lightning flashes over the flat horizon, illuminating the desolate stretch of highway. For a split second, Ken sees the ghostly silhouette of an old billboard. "You're never alone on Route 49. The letters are faded, the slogan half-eaten by rust. He forces a laugh that sounds more like a cough. "Could have fooled me," he mutters. "The road is too quiet. There should be other drivers, but he hasn't passed a single pair of headlights for over an hour." Ken used to love the road. It was freedom, escape, a place where thoughts had space to breathe. But not since that night. Not since the accident. The memory comes back in flashes he can't stop. Brakes screeching, a girl's scream, the shattering of glass. He tells himself it wasn't his fault, but guilt travels with him like an invisible passenger, whispering at the edge of his thoughts. He turns the CB radio on, hoping for chatter, some voice to break the silence. At first, there's only static. Then, a faint voice crackles through the noise. "Breaker 19, it says. Ken leans forward. "Go ahead, driver." There's a pause. Then, the same voice again. Calm, quiet, with an odd familiarity. "Long night, huh?" Ken frowns. "Yeah, something like that. You on this stretch too?" Static. Then the voice again, slightly distorted. "Yeah, I'm right behind you." He glances at the rearview mirror. Only darkness, rain, and the faint red glow of his taillights. No headlights, no truck. "Copy that," he says, forcing a chuckle. "Funny, I don't see anyone back there." The voice responds with a soft laugh that sounds almost like his own. "You're not looking close enough." A chill crawls down Ken's spine. He turns off the CB, convincing himself it's a prank. Maybe some bored driver playing tricks. But when he reaches for his coffee, the radio flicks back on by itself. "Ken," the voice says. He freezes. "What did you just say?" "Ken," it repeats. "Don't stop." He hadn't told anyone his name. Not on this channel. Not tonight. The storm thickens. Rain lashes against the windshield, wipers struggling to keep up. His hands tremble as he grips the wheel tighter. He tries to tell himself he's imagining it, that exhaustion is making him hear things. But then the voice speaks again, low and slow. "She's still out there." The world seems to tilt. The truck drifts toward the shoulder, tires hissing on wet gravel. He slams the brakes, the trailer fishtailing behind him. The whole rig shudders to a stop. His heart is pounding so hard he can hear it echo in his ears. "Who are you?" he shouts at the radio. Static. Then, "You know who I am." Lightning flashes again. And this time he sees something ahead on the road. Pair of headlights. Dim, motionless, pointed straight at him. The shape of a truck just like his, idling in the rain. He blinks hard, but it's still there, maybe 50 yards ahead. His own truck's model. Same color. Same mud stains along the grill. He throws the transmission into park and steps out into the downpour, boots splashing in puddles. The rain is so heavy it muffles everything. But even through the roar he hears faint static, coming from the other truck's cab. He calls out, "Hey, you okay in there?" No answer. Just the hiss of rain and the whine of wind through the trees. He approaches slowly, each step echoing too loudly. When he gets close enough to touch the door handle, he stops. The headlights cut out. Everything goes black. The static stops. A second later, his own truck behind him honks. One long, blaring note that makes his heart leap. He spins around, soaked, breath fogging in the cold air. His truck's lights are still on. The driver's door is open. The CB radio crackles faintly. From the darkness inside, his own voice calls out, "Ken, don't stand in the road." He stumbles backward, eyes wide, the sound of his name echoing in a perfect mimic of his tone, his inflection, even his panic. He runs back toward his cab, half slipping in the mud, and slams the door behind him. The cab light flickers on, harsh and white. His reflection in the windshield looks pale, trembling. For a moment, he could swear the reflection moves slightly slower than he does, just a beat delayed. The CB hums again. The voice sounds calmer now. "You shouldn't have stopped. What do you want?" Ken whispers. "To keep you company." The dashboard clock flickers back to 11:47. The same time again. He shifts into drive and speeds forward, passing the spot where the other truck had been. But now there's nothing. Just wet asphalt and empty road. No sign of tracks. No sound but the engine and the faint hum of the tires. After a few miles, the rain stops suddenly. The sky clears without warning, and the road stretches out beneath the glow of a full moon. It's too quiet now, unnaturally so. No frogs, no wind, no engine noise. The truck moves, but he can't hear it. He looks down. The speedometer needle is frozen at 0. "Ken," the voice says again softly, "you're not supposed to be here." He looks at the radio, breath shallow. "Then where am I?" "You never left Route 49. The headlights ahead appear again, closer this time. He slows down, heart thudding in his chest. The beams don't move. They're aimed directly at him. He reaches for the brakes, but his foot finds only air. The pedal's gone. The wheel locks. The truck doesn't stop. The last thing he sees before the light swallows him is a reflection in the windshield. His own face, but older, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. When the police find his truck 2 days later, it's parked neatly at a gas station off Route 49. The keys are still in the ignition, headlights off, tank full. No one saw him arrive. No one saw him leave. The logbook in the passenger seat records one final note in shaky handwriting. "Still driving. Still hearing me." Truckers still talk about him when the nights are too long and the road too quiet. They say sometimes, when you tune your CB just right on Route 49, a voice answers. And it sounds exactly like yours. The sound fades with a low hum, replaced by the whisper of rain giving way to soft thunder. A storm that rolls gently into the next town, where the air smells of pine and secrets waiting to breathe. Rain drummed on the cab roof in a steady rhythm that should have been comforting. Ken kept his hands on the wheel and watched the yellow lines flick past, hypnotic. The only light came from his dash and the occasional burst of lightning that showed an empty highway stretching in both directions. He hadn't seen another car for an hour. The odometer ticked, but it felt like he wasn't moving at all. He turned the CB knob to chase some static, hoping to catch another driver. "Breaker 19. Anyone out here tonight?" Only white noise answered. Then, after a pause, a faint voice bled through. "Long night, huh?" It was flat, quiet, and oddly familiar. Ken leaned closer. "Yeah, sure is. Where you running?" Static. Then, "Right behind you." He laughed under his breath, but the sound died quickly. The rearview mirror showed nothing except his own taillights shimmering in the rain. When he reached to switch the radio off, the same voice came again. "Don't stop." He froze. No one knew his name on this frequency. The voice knew him. The rain thickened, hitting the windshield in sheets. He could barely see the road ahead when lightning flashed, showing a set of headlights 100 yards in front of him. A truck like his, idling in the middle of Route 49. Ken slowed, wipers screeching. "What the hell?" He eased onto the shoulder and stepped out into the downpour. The air smelled of metal and wet dirt. The other truck's cab was dark, but the CB inside crackled faintly. "Hello?" he shouted. No answer. He reached for the door handle. The headlights went out. The entire highway plunged into blackness, except for the glow from his own rig behind him. Then his own horn blared, one long, low note that vibrated in his chest. He turned, drenched and shaking, to see the cab light on in his truck. A voice from inside called his name. His voice. "Ken, get back in the truck." He stumbled backward, heart hammering. The rain suddenly stopped as if cut off. The world went silent. He climbed back into his cab and slammed the door, breathing hard. The CB hissed softly. "You shouldn't have stopped," the voice said. He gripped the wheel. "Who are you?" "You know." The clock on the dash blinked 11:47. Same as before. The road stretched empty ahead. He pressed the gas, desperate to move, and the truck rolled forward. The lights from the other vehicle were gone, but the radio kept whispering under the static. Sometimes it sounded like a girl crying, sometimes like brakes squealing. He drove faster. The asphalt shimmered in the moonlight. Then the engine noise faded even though the RPMs climbed. He looked down. The speedometer read 0. His hands trembled. "Ken," the radio said again, softer. "You never left." Headlights bloomed ahead, blinding, too close. He jerked the wheel. The world flashed white, then black. When state troopers found the rig 2 days later, it sat neatly at an abandoned gas station. The tank was full, the driver's door open. The CB was on, whispering the same phrase over and over in a voice that matched Ken's. "Still driving, still hearing me." And on quiet nights, other truckers say if you pass through Route 49, tune your radio just right and listen carefully. You might hear a tired voice ask, "Long night, huh?" and realize it sounds exactly like your own. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly, flickering red against the endless stretch of two-lane road. Maggie pushed the door open, a small brass bell chiming as she stepped into the warmth. It was nearly midnight. The place was empty except for a lone waitress cleaning a counter that already gleamed. Maggie slid into a booth by the window, shaking rain from her jacket. Her car had died miles back, and this had been the only light in sight for almost an hour. The waitress, a pale woman with hair tied in a too-tight bun, walked over with a slow smile. "Coffee?" Maggie nodded. "Please, and maybe something to eat?" The woman stared for a moment before saying, "Kitchen's closed. Just coffee tonight." Maggie watched her pour the cup. The coffee was black, steaming. But when the waitress placed it down, Maggie noticed her hands, thin, trembling, smudged with something dark under the nails. She wanted to ask if everything was okay, but the woman was already walking away, wiping her hands on a towel that looked stained too. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Maggie's phone had no signal. She checked again anyway, the familiar hopeless gesture of someone stranded. That's when she noticed the diner clock. It was frozen at 12:03 a.m. The second hand ticked once, then stopped again. The sound of a door creaking made her glance up. A man had entered, tall, wearing a soaked flannel shirt and carrying a duffel bag. He didn't look at Maggie or the waitress, just sat at the far end of the counter. His reflection in the chrome backsplash was wrong, delayed by a second, like an old video glitch. Maggie blinked, thinking it was her imagination. But when she looked again, his reflection was still staring at her, even though he wasn't. The waitress walked to him and spoke in a low tone Maggie couldn't make out. The man didn't respond, only lifted his coffee when it arrived. Maggie turned her gaze back to the rain-smeared window. For a second, She thought she saw movement outside, a shadow walking slowly between the gas pumps. There was no car there, no sound of footsteps, just a shifting darkness that made her stomach clench. She stood, pretending to stretch, and tried to peek toward the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar. Behind it, she heard whispers, faint and wet, like someone speaking underwater. Her pulse quickened. When she looked back toward the counter, both the waitress and the man were gone. The coffee pot still steamed. "Hello!" Maggie's voice cracked. A sudden clatter echoed from the kitchen. She took a hesitant step forward, the floor creaking beneath her boots. The smell changed, metallic, heavy, like rust and rain mixed with something worse. She reached the kitchen door and pushed it open. The lights inside flickered. Pots hung neatly from hooks, gleaming in the dim glow, but every one of them dripped with something red that wasn't water. Then she saw the wall. Written in shaky black letters, "We never close." Something moved behind her. She turned just as the waitress stepped into view, smiling the same distant smile. But her apron was soaked now, her hair undone, her eyes flat and unblinking. "You wanted something to eat, right?" she asked softly. Maggie stumbled back. I think I'll just go." The waitress tilted her head. "You can't leave." Maggie ran for the door. Her boots slipped on the slick floor as the lights blinked off completely. She threw her shoulder into the front door. It didn't budge. The neon sign outside still glowed, but the street beyond it was gone. Where there should have been a road, there was only endless black water stretching out beneath a moonless sky. She screamed, pounding on the glass. The reflection in the window stared back, her own face but smiling. Behind it, faint figures moved through the diner's dim light, shadows of people sitting in booths, eating silently, eyes blank. The door finally opened on its own, a soft bell chime breaking the silence. Maggie hesitated, heart hammering, then stepped outside. Her car was there again, headlights dim, engine idling. She climbed in, soaked and trembling, and slammed the door shut. The diner behind her flickered once more, its sign reading something different now, "Open forever." When she looked in the rearview mirror, the waitress stood outside under the rain, waving slowly. The coffee cup was still on the booth table where Maggie had sat, but it was now full again, steaming gently, waiting for the next traveler to wander in from the dark. The town of Hollow Creek looked like something out of an old postcard. White fences, a small church steeple, and a main street where everyone waved at each other. To outsiders, it seemed perfect, almost too perfect. But for Eli, who had grown up there, the silence after sunset had always felt wrong. The nights were too still, the stars too dim, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. He had returned after 15 years to sell his late father's property, a small farmhouse on the edge of the woods. The air was thick with the scent of rain and pine. The real estate agent never showed, so Eli parked outside the old house, stepping out into the damp grass. Every window was dark. The paint had peeled from the door. He expected it to feel smaller after all these years, but instead, it seemed to lean toward him, taller than he remembered, its shadow swallowing the yard. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Dust motes drifted in the flashlight beam as Eli walked through the living room. Everything was where it had been. The rocking chair, the wall clock, the framed photo of his mother smiling stiffly beside his father. But there was something new. Deep gouges in the hardwood floor near the back door, as if someone had dragged something heavy. He turned toward the kitchen. The smell hit him first. Iron, old wood, and something faintly rotten. A stack of plates sat untouched on the counter, covered in a thin layer of grime. Then the refrigerator motor kicked on suddenly, startling him. The hum sounded almost human, like a sigh. He exhaled and laughed under his breath, telling himself it was just an old house settling. But the feeling didn't fade. As he checked each room, memories bled through. The night his mother disappeared, the way his father refused to call the police, the sound of pacing footsteps in the hallway long after he'd gone to bed. The townsfolk had whispered about it for years, but no one had dared ask questions. Hollow Creek didn't like questions. In his father's study, A single light bulb flickered weakly. The desk was covered in yellowed papers. Maps of the surrounding woods. Notes scrawled in his father's handwriting. Don't open the cellar door after midnight. And they remember the blood. Eli frowned, tracing a shaking finger over the words. The cellar door had always been locked when he was a kid. He remembered pressing his ear against it once, hearing what sounded like breathing from the other side. His father had caught him and screamed, a sound that had haunted his dreams for years. Now that same door waited at the end of the hall, half hidden behind a coat rack. The lock was still there, but the wood around it was splintered. Someone or something had forced it open. "Dad," Eli whispered, as if expecting an answer. He descended slowly, the stairs creaking beneath his weight. The smell grew stronger, metallic and wet. His flashlight trembled in his hand as he reached the bottom. The cellar was filled with shelves, old jars, tools, and dusty bottles. But in the corner, the earth was freshly disturbed. He crouched, brushing the dirt away. Underneath he found bones. Not animal bones, human. Dozens of them arranged carefully, almost respectfully, in a circle. He stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. The flashlight flickered, and for an instant, he saw movement between the shelves. A figure watching him. Small, hunched, eyes shining faintly. It darted out of sight with a wet scraping sound. "Who's there?" he shouted. No answer, just the sound of dripping water. The bulb overhead flickered again, and then it went out. He was swallowed by darkness. His breath came fast and shallow. He heard footsteps circling him, slow, deliberate. Something brushed his arm, cold and rough like bark. He fumbled for the stairs, climbing fast, heart pounding. The cellar door slammed shut above him with a deafening thud. He hit it hard with his shoulder, shouting until his voice cracked. Then silence. When he finally burst through, gasping, the house was different. The walls were clean, new. The lights were on. In the living room, his father sat in the rocking chair, smiling faintly. "You came home," he said, his voice calm. "I told you not to open it." Eli froze. His father looked exactly as he had the night he vanished. No older, no decay, just the same tired eyes. Behind him, the shadows of small figures moved along the walls, stretching and twisting like roots. His father's smile widened, splitting unnaturally. "Now they'll never let you leave." Eli turned and ran out the front door, into the night. The road was gone, replaced by a forest that shouldn't have been there. The trees leaned toward him, whispering in 1,000 voices that sounded like his own. The next morning, Hollow Creek's mailman found the farmhouse empty again. The door stood open, the floor clean, no footprints. But the cellar door was locked from the inside, and faintly, from beneath the floorboards, came the steady creak of a rocking chair. The storm had rolled in just after dusk, drenching the small mountain town of Ashwood Hollow in a curtain of relentless rain. Lightning cracked across the horizon, flashing against the fog-drenched windows of the Ashwood Motel, a relic from the 1960s that looked abandoned even when it wasn't. Inside, a single lamp burned at the front desk. The manager, a man in his 60s named Mr. Darnell, sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper that was nearly falling apart. When Claire, soaked to the bone and shivering, stepped through the door, he didn't look up right away. She was exhausted, her rental car broken down on the mountain road. Her phone had died hours ago, and the endless woods on either side had started to feel like a living thing, watching her, breathing with her. "Evening," Mr. Darnell said finally, lowering the paper. His eyes were small, pale, and strangely unfocused. "You need a room? Please, just for the night." He nodded and slid the guest book toward her. The paper was damp, yellowed, its pages curled from moisture. As she signed, she noticed every other name on the list was written in the same exact handwriting. She hesitated. "Do you get a lot of guests?" Mr. Darnell smiled thinly. "Enough." He handed her a key marked room 7. The metal tag was cold and heavy in her palm. She turned toward the hallway, carpet worn thin and reeking faintly of mildew. Every step made the lights above her flicker. Room 7 was small. Just a bed, a nightstand, and a window that looked out onto the dark tree line. She peeled off her wet jacket and sank onto the mattress. The air inside smelled of rain and old cigarettes. She turned on the TV, but it showed only static. The sound filled the room like whispering. After a while, she turned it off and lay in silence. But then she heard it, a soft tapping. Once, twice, 3 times. Came from behind the wall. She held her breath, listening. The tapping became a slow scratching, as though someone was dragging their nails just beneath the wallpaper. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. The sound stopped. She waited. 10 seconds. 20. Just when she started to relax, the tapping returned. Louder, closer. She stepped toward the wall, pressing her ear against it. The sound was rhythmic now, like breathing. Then, faintly, a voice whispered through the plaster. "Help me." Claire stumbled back, heart racing. "Who's there?" The voice didn't answer, only began to weep softly. She turned toward the door, fumbling for the handle, when something caught her eye. The wallpaper near the corner had bubbled and torn slightly, revealing old wood beneath it. And carved into the wood were faint letters. "Room 7, never leave." Her breath caught. She grabbed her phone instinctively, forgetting it was dead, and ran to the hallway. But when she opened the door, the hall wasn't there. It was the same room again, same bed, same window, same flickering lamp. She turned, panic rising, and found Mr. Darnell standing in the doorway. His face was pale, eyes distant. "You shouldn't have listened," he said quietly. "They always lie." "Who?" she screamed. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. The lock clicked. "The ones between the walls. They want someone to take their place." The lights went out. In the blackness, she heard movement, slow, dragging steps across the carpet. Something cold brushed her ankle. She kicked out, tripping backward, her hands finding the wall. Felt soft now, almost like skin. A faint glow appeared near the ceiling. The wallpaper peeled away on its own. Curling and revealing faces pressed into the wall. Eyes open, mouths frozen in silent screams. One of them looked exactly like her. She screamed, clawing at the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. Mr. Darnell's voice came from behind her. "Don't fight it. You'll feel better once you stop breathing." The walls pulsed, the faces shifting, whispering her name. The air grew thick, hard to inhale. The last thing she saw before the light died completely was her own reflection in the window. Pale, wide-eyed, and smiling. When morning came, the rain had stopped. A young couple stopped by the Ashwood Motel looking for shelter. The front desk was empty, the guest book open on the counter. The newest entry read in delicate handwriting, "Claire Duval, Room 7. And behind the front desk, Mr. Darnell returned to his paper, humming softly as another name was added to the book by an unseen hand. The town of Marrowbend had always been quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and nobody locked their doors. Nestled deep in the Midwest, surrounded by endless wheat fields and a single railway that cut through the horizon. It was the kind of town people passed through but never remembered. Yet for Caleb, a local journalist desperate for something meaningful to write, it was home, a place that had grown more suffocating the longer he stayed. When the first disappearance happened, it barely made the news. A young woman named Lorna was last seen leaving the Marrowbend Public Library after closing. No witnesses, no struggle, just gone. 2 weeks later, an old farmer went missing from his field, his tractor still running in circles until it ran out of gas. The sheriff said coyotes. Everyone else just said, "The fields took him." Caleb didn't believe either explanation. He wanted the truth. On a gray October morning, he drove out past the old grain mill, the one no one used anymore. Locals said the land was cursed, that strange lights hovered over it at night. Caleb brought his camera, his notebook, and his cynicism. The air was heavy, still. The tall stalks of wheat bent slightly in a wind he couldn't feel. He parked beside the rusted silo, the metal groaning as it shifted in the breeze. The structure loomed against the sky, its surface covered in strange markings. Symbols carved deep into the steel, some still dark with what looked like dried blood. He snapped a photo. The instant the shutter clicked, his camera screen glitched, displaying a black figure standing behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just the endless gold of the wheat fields swaying slowly, like the ground itself was breathing. He tried to shake it off, muttering to himself. But the deeper he walked into the field, the quieter everything became. No insects, no wind, just silence. The kind of silence that pressed on his eardrums until it felt like his head might split. Then came the hum. Low at first, barely audible. A vibration beneath his boots. He looked down and saw the soil moving, pulsing. Something brushed against his ankle. He froze. A hand, small, gray, and wrinkled, was reaching up through the earth, grasping at his leg. He stumbled back, heart hammering, as another hand broke through the soil nearby. Then another. Then dozens. Pale arms, clawing their way upward, fingernails packed with dirt. Caleb ran, his breath ragged, camera banging against his chest. The hum grew louder, rising into a droning chant that seemed to come from everywhere. He looked over his shoulder and saw the figures fully emerge from the ground. They weren't bodies. They were shapes of ash and soil, hollow eyes glowing faintly with light. He reached the edge of the field, panting, collapsing against his car. His camera slipped from his grip and hit the ground. The screen flickered on its own. The last photo he'd taken now showed the figures closer, surrounding him, their faces blurred but their eyes sharp and knowing. A whisper drifted across the field. "Stay!" He fumbled with his keys, throwing himself into the driver's seat. The car started on the first try, but the headlights didn't illuminate the road. They just reflected the same endless field ahead. No town, no trees, no horizon. Just wheat. He turned the wheel frantically, accelerating, but no matter which direction he went, the scenery didn't change. The hum returned, vibrating through the car's frame, rattling his teeth. He screamed, slamming the brakes. The engine sputtered and died. Then, slowly, the field began to move. The stalks bent away, parting like water. In the space that opened, he saw a figure standing, Lorna. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth open in a silent scream. Behind her, the others gathered, faces pale and stretched. They reached out to him with trembling hands, and when they spoke, their voices overlapped in a chilling harmony. "The earth remembers us. Now it remembers you." Caleb stumbled out of the car, backing away. "You're not real," he whispered, but the ground answered him, cracking open beneath his feet, revealing something vast and living beneath the soil. A deep, guttural sound filled the air. He fell to his knees, clutching his ears, as whispers poured into his mind. They weren't words, but memories. Screams, tears, pleading, all swallowed by the same hungry earth. He crawled toward the car, dragging himself through the dirt. The figures didn't move closer, but their shadows stretched toward him, long and impossible, wrapping around his legs like vines. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the field folding in on itself, the wheat swallowing him whole. Days later, a search party found his car empty, the engine still warm. The only thing left behind was his camera, lying half-buried in the soil. The sheriff turned it on and found one last photograph, taken from the ground, facing up. In it, Caleb's own terrified face stared at the sky as dozens of hands pulled him into the earth. Marrowbend went silent after that. The fields grew taller. The wind never stopped humming. And at night, under a pale moon, locals say you can hear voices whispering through the wheat, pleading for someone, anyone, to dig them out. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the streets of Ravenbrook slick and glistening beneath the yellow glow of old street lamps. Puddles reflected the warped shapes of empty houses and power lines that buzzed like angry insects. Nina drove slowly through the quiet town, her headlights cutting through the mist. She had come back only because of the letter, the one she'd received 3 days earlier, written in her sister's handwriting. The problem was, her sister had been dead for 6 years. The letter had been short, just one line, "Come home before the fog takes the rest of us." She parked outside her childhood house, a narrow two-story home at the edge of the marshlands. The paint was peeling, the windows clouded from inside. Her stomach tightened as she stepped onto the porch. The front door was unlocked. It opened with a long, slow creak that echoed down the hallway. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. Her flashlight beam swept across the dusty furniture, the family portraits still hanging crooked on the walls. Her sister Mara's face smiled faintly from every frame, frozen in time. Nina called out, "Mara?" Her voice cracked. "It's me." No answer. Only the house's old bones settling in the dark. She walked deeper in, her footsteps muffled by damp carpet. The memories came in flashes. The way she and Mara used to whisper stories under the covers. How they dared each other to look into the marsh after dark. There had been voices out there, they said. Lights that floated low to the ground. People in Ravenbrook called them the lanterns. Nina had never believed it. Until now. She reached the kitchen. The table was set for two. A fresh pot of tea steamed faintly in the center, even though no one had lived here in years. Her heart pounded. "Mara," she whispered, almost pleading. Then, from upstairs, came the sound of humming. A familiar tune. The lullaby their mother used to sing. Her knees weakened. She climbed the stairs, one at a time, the sound growing louder. It came from Mara's old room. The door was half open, light spilling out in a dim, bluish glow. She pushed it open. The room was exactly as she remembered. Posters on the walls, a cracked mirror, a lamp flickering on the nightstand. And sitting on the edge of the bed was Mara. Pale, thin, her hair hanging wet over her shoulders. She looked up slowly, smiling in that same gentle way she used to. "Nina," she said softly. "You came." Nina froze. "How are you here?" Mara tilted her head, as if she didn't understand the question. "You shouldn't have stayed away so long. The fog doesn't like it when you forget." "The fog?" Mara stood, and as she did, the floor beneath her creaked like it was breathing. "It's spreading, Nina. It's taking the town one house at a time. You have to see it." She reached out her hand. Her fingers were cold, colder than human skin should be. Nina pulled back. "Mara, you're—" But Mara only smiled wider, eyes clouding to a milky white. "You'll understand soon." The lamp went out. The blue glow intensified, coming not from the light, but from outside. Nina turned toward the window. The marsh was glowing. Mist rolled in waves across the ground, and within it were shapes, human shapes, walking slowly through the fog, each carrying a flickering lantern. Their faces were wrong, stretched and empty, mouths hanging open in silence. Nina stumbled back, whispering, "No?" Mara's voice came from right beside her ear now, though she hadn't moved. "They come when you call them." The window shattered. The fog spilled into the room like smoke, curling around Nina's legs. She coughed, trying to run, but the air grew thick and heavy, pressing against her skin like invisible hands. She reached for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Mara's figure began to dissolve, her face flickering like static. "Don't fight it," she murmured. "I didn't." The fog swallowed her completely. Nina's flashlight flickered. Through the haze, she saw figures emerging from the hallway. Shadowed silhouettes, dripping water, each one holding a dim lantern. The light burned blue inside the glass, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She screamed and ran toward the stairs, but the house seemed to shift beneath her feet, the walls stretching, the steps elongating. Each breath felt heavier than the last. When she looked down, her hands were fading at the edges, turning translucent like the mist itself. She stumbled outside, gasping, the fog curling around her in every direction. The street was gone. Every house, every tree, dissolved into a sea of gray. The lanterns moved in slow, ghostly procession through the fog, their light flickering in rhythm, like they were breathing together. Nina's phone buzzed faintly in her pocket. When she pulled it out, there was a new message. It was from Mara. "Don't leave me again." The phone slipped from her hand. The last thing she felt was the cold embrace of the mist wrapping around her like water, pulling her into silence. By morning, Ravenbrook was gone from the map. The marsh was still there, but where the houses once stood, there was only fog. Locals from nearby towns say that on clear nights, if you stand by the edge of the water, you can see small lights moving in the mist. And sometimes, if you listen closely, a faint voice calls out through the fog, whispering, "Come home." The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the mountain cabins, rattling loose shutters and carrying the faint sound of something that almost resembled breathing. Liam tightened his jacket, his flashlight beam cutting through the swirling snow. He had been hiking for 3 days now, alone, following the last known coordinates of his missing friends. The group had gone camping in the Elderpine Wilderness, a stretch of forest so remote that even rescue teams rarely ventured this far. But Liam had to come. He had to know what really happened that night. He found the first cabin just after dusk, half buried beneath a slope of snow. Its door was hanging from one hinge, swinging with every gust. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the smell of smoke and something else, something metallic. His boots creaked on the warped wood as he stepped in, scanning the walls. Old hunting tools, a broken lantern, and a trail of dark stains leading toward the back room. He followed the marks, his pulse pounding in his ears. The back door was splintered, the lock bent outward as if something had forced its way in. He crouched, touching one of the dark smears. It was frozen, but unmistakable. Blood. Then, something creaked upstairs. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. No response. Just that faint creak again, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. He swallowed hard and started up the stairs. Each step groaned under his weight. The flashlight beam trembled in his hand. When he reached the top, the sound stopped. The hallway stretched out before him, long and narrow, lined with half-open doors. The first room was empty except for an overturned chair. The second held a decaying mattress, the sheets shredded. The third, he hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside, something was carved into the wall, deep scratches forming words. "Don't look outside." Liam froze. His breath fogged the beam of light. He turned, half expecting to see someone behind him, but there was no one. Only the faint whistle of wind through the broken window. He moved closer to the wall, tracing the letters with his gloved fingers. The wood was gouged deep, like whoever wrote it did so in panic. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw something outside the window. A shape, standing perfectly still at the tree line. He leaned closer, trying to focus, but the glass was frosted over. He rubbed at it with his sleeve, and what he saw on the other side made his blood run cold. It was a figure, tall, unnaturally thin. Its arms were too long, hanging almost to its knees, and where its face should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin. Liam stumbled back, hitting the dresser behind him. The thing outside tilted its head slowly, almost curiously, then began to move, gliding soundlessly across the snow toward the cabin. He ran down the stairs, through the narrow hallway, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He slammed the front door shut and shoved a chair under the handle. His flashlight beam danced frantically across the room, catching glimpses of empty corners, his shadow jerking like a living thing. Then came the tapping, soft at first, like fingers drumming against the window pane, then louder, more insistent. He turned, heart hammering, as the tapping became scratching. It was at the window now. He could see the faint outline of a hand, if you could call it that, pressing against the glass. Long, bony fingers, stretching impossibly far, scraping slow circles into the frost. "Go away," he whispered. The hand vanished. Silence. He dared to step forward, peering out. Nothing. Only darkness and drifting snow. He exhaled shakily. Then, from behind him came a whisper. "You looked." He spun around. The flashlight dropped from his hand, rolling across the floor. In the split second before it went out, he saw something standing in the doorway. The same pale shape, its featureless face inches from his own. He screamed, backing away, but the thing didn't move. It simply stood there, head tilting again, as if studying him. The air grew colder, so cold his breath froze midair. The cabin walls began to creak, bending inward as though the entire structure was breathing. Liam lunged for the back door, bursting into the night. The forest swallowed him whole. He ran without direction, branches clawing at his clothes, snow burning his skin. Behind him, he heard it moving, no footsteps, just that low hum of something vast and alive. He tripped, crashing into the snow, the world spinning. He crawled forward, desperate, until he saw a faint orange glow ahead. A campfire, flickering weakly in the storm. He stumbled toward it, half blind. But when he reached it, there was no warmth, no sound. The fire wasn't real. It was frozen solid, its flames made of light that didn't move. And sitting beside it were his three friends, their bodies motionless, eyes open, faces covered in frost. He fell to his knees, sobbing. No, no. Then, slowly, their heads turned toward him, perfectly in sync. Their mouths opened, and through cracked lips came the same whisper that echoed through the trees. You shouldn't have come back. Liam tried to run, but the snow beneath him turned soft and black, pulling him downward. He screamed as it swallowed him whole. The last thing he saw before the world went dark was that faceless shape standing above him, holding his dropped flashlight. The beam reflected off its smooth skin, and for a moment, in the distorted reflection, he saw his own terrified face staring back. When the rescue team arrived weeks later, they found the cabins empty. Only one thing remained on the wall, freshly carved this time, as if someone had done it recently. Don't look outside. The town of Hollow's Edge wasn't on any map anymore. Once, it had been a quiet mining settlement tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by fog so thick it seemed to cling to your lungs. Now it was a ghost, forgotten by time, erased from records, and left to rot in the shadow of the forest that consumed it. But for Evelyn Price, a paranormal investigator and podcaster obsessed with small-town disappearances, Hollow's Edge was the story that could define her career, or destroy her completely. She arrived at sunset, her car crawling down the cracked asphalt road that disappeared beneath a wall of mist. The air felt wrong, heavy and charged, like the sky before a storm. Every few yards, her headlights caught faded road signs eaten by rust. Welcome to Hollow's Edge. One barely read, the letters peeling like burned paper. The town itself was silent. Houses stood empty, doors ajar, curtains fluttering in the still air. There were no birds, no insects, only the hum of her car engine and the faint echo of her own heartbeat. She parked in front of what used to be a general store. The glass was shattered, the inside dark except for faint movement deeper within. Evelyn took her recorder from the passenger seat and clicked it on. Day 1, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Hollow's Edge appears completely abandoned. No sign of wildlife or inhabitants. Temperature drop. Unexplained. Feels like the air itself is watching. She pushed open the door. It creaked violently, the sound carrying through the empty street like a warning. Inside, shelves were overturned, cans scattered across the floor. A single oil lamp sat upright on the counter, still full, wick untouched, as if waiting to be used. Her footsteps echoed. She called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Silence. Then, faintly, a sound from the back room. A rhythmic tapping, like fingers on wood. She froze, recorder still running. I'm hearing a tapping sound. Possible animal. The tapping stopped. Then, slowly, something began whispering her name. Evelyn. Her blood turned cold. The voice was low, guttural, and came from everywhere at once. She turned in circles, flashlight cutting through the dust. Who's there? The whisper grew louder, closer. The air thickened, dust swirling in impossible patterns. She stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf, cans clattering to the ground. When the noise stopped, everything went still again, except for the recorder in her hand. It was still playing, but the voice on the tape wasn't hers anymore. I can see you. Evelyn dropped it. The recorder hit the floor and continued playing. Static now, then faint laughter, childlike and distant. She snatched it up, her hands shaking, and bolted from the store. Outside, the fog had thickened, swallowing the street. Shapes flickered within it, human silhouettes that vanished when she focused on them. She walked quickly toward the old church at the end of the road, its steeple leaning dangerously. Something about it called to her, a pull she couldn't explain. Inside, the pews were covered in a thick layer of dust. The altar stood empty, but behind it, the wall was covered in strange carvings. Spirals, runes, and one word repeated over and over in long, frantic strokes. "Remember." Evelyn raised her camera, snapping photos. Each flash illuminated the carvings, the walls, the floor, and on the fourth flash she caught a figure in the pews. A man, seated, facing forward, unmoving. Her heart nearly stopped. "Sir?" she whispered. "Are you okay?" No response. She approached slowly, the wooden floor creaking beneath her. The man's clothes were tattered, his skin grayish, lips cracked. When she touched his shoulder, his head turned suddenly, too fast, and his eyes locked on hers. They were hollow, glassy, reflecting her flashlight like mirrors. He smiled. "You came back," he said. Evelyn stumbled backward, horrified. I don't understand." But before she could move, the church bell rang, deafening. The sound shook the walls, splintering wood, echoing through her chest. The fog outside surged in through the open doors, flooding the room. The man stood, his body jerking like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Dozens of other shapes began to rise from the pews, men, women, children, all pale, all smiling the same hollow smile. Their voices merged into a single, low chant. "Remember Hollow's Edge," Evelyn screamed, running for the door, but the fog was solid now, pressing against her like water. The figures followed, their movements jerky and unnatural, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She burst into the street, gasping, the air freezing her lungs. The town had changed. The buildings were no longer abandoned. They were new again, alive. Lights glowed in windows. Shadows moved inside homes. The sound of laughter drifted from somewhere nearby. But when she turned to look, the faces weren't right. The people walking the streets moved in loops, repeating the same gestures again and again. A woman waving, a man dropping his hat, a child laughing, all cycling endlessly. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. The screen showed a live video feed, her own camera still recording. But the timestamp was wrong. It said October 31st, 1957, the same date Hollow's Edge was said to have vanished. She looked up just in time to see the church door slam shut behind her. The bell rang once more, and when it did, the people in the streets stopped moving. Slowly, they turned toward her in perfect unison. Evelyn's breath hitched. Then, one by one, they began whispering her name. She ran toward her car, fumbling with the keys. The engine wouldn't start. The fog pressed against the windows, her own reflection warping in the glass. The last thing she saw before everything went black was her recorder, sitting on the dashboard, its red light still blinking. When she woke, it was morning. The town was gone, no buildings, no roads, just forest. Her car sat in a clearing surrounded by trees. Her camera and recorder were missing. Weeks later, hikers found her wandering near the highway, barefoot and silent, eyes distant. She never spoke about what she saw. But sometimes, when you listen to her old podcast feed, the one she abandoned, you can hear something strange in the background. Between her last words and the static, a voice murmurs softly, almost pleadingly, "Remember Hollow's Edge." The motel room smelled of mildew and old smoke. Rain hammered against the windows as Daniel, the lone survivor of a forgotten town, sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the flickering TV. His hands trembled, not from cold but from the memories he couldn't erase. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The hollow faces in the wheat fields, the pale children by the frozen fire, Evelyn's reflection in the fog. He wasn't sure if he had escaped or if the world outside was just another version of the nightmare. The TV crackled suddenly, the screen shifting to static. Then, faintly, a voice broke through his own. The recording from years ago. If anyone finds this, don't go to those towns. His heart pounded. The voice continued, softer this time, whispering, "They're coming." The lights dimmed. The rain stopped. In the silence that followed, Daniel looked toward the mirror and saw movement behind his reflection. Shapes, faint and familiar, closing in. His voice caught in his throat. The static from the TV rose to a deafening roar as the reflection smiled, whispering the same words echoing through every cursed place he had fled. "You never left.